Greetings from Paul Levy, having a cup of tea in one of my favourite places to do a bit of academic writing and reflection. It's Brighton's Open Market, very nice cafe called the Flying Saucer, always forget the name. And I've just come out of the Monday session that we had, and we played a game, and hopefully I'm going to get to play that game with both groups. And it's a negotiation game, and it particularly focuses on negotiating internationally. It's a simulation of what it's like to try and do business with another country, which of course involves doing business in another country, because all of their economic systems will start to match your economic systems. In this particular case, this is big stuff in this simulation. You are a government needing to negotiate with another government over trade in quite a volatile situation. But so much of it also relates to doing business negotiation, whether you're a big business or a small one. And I just wanted to share some reflections without spoiling the game for people that haven't played it. But part of what it is it's around some of the literature that you might want to read around negotiation. And I was just noticing again how we're covering international management with Nadia and some of the guest speakers around some of the big stuff. That some of this is really a kind of HR thing. It's around people skills, and it's around the systems and culture of different countries have different approaches to HR, human resources. Some countries have very embedded cultures where you have cultures of respect, and you might not be able to talk to somebody at your level in another country because those are cultures of seniority, and you actually have to speak to people on a much higher level in the organisation to get the same stuff done, simply because decision-making processes are more hierarchical. You might be in more of a team culture, but there you need to speak to the director of X, who's the only person that can sign off at a certain level of spend, for example. In the case of our negotiation, people had different roles in the teams. And in some cases you will notice that the head of an organisation has the final say, much more than in other cultures where they might still have somebody who's the boss, who's the director, but who operates in a much more collaborative, involving way and won't make decisions without the agreement of fellow team members. Some countries also have very, very specific cultures that are around the rituals of greeting people, and it can literally be around some of the things you say to honour other people. In some cultures it's more formal, in others it's more informal. So, and actually I'll just mention, I remember working in Slovenia for a while, and I almost had my hand broken by a handshake because the handshake's much more important in some countries than others. That changes over time, it changes with different generations, but you will certainly find that there are books out there. You can go to Waterstones, the library, about doing business in different countries is about honouring, respecting and adapting to the different rituals and cultural norms that people have. So that's just to kick off some thoughts also around the fact that doing business involves interacting literally technically with different technological systems, different levels of bureaucracy, different assumptions, that some cultures really want every single thing written down before anything is agreed. In other cases you might agree the headline stuff first and be able to proceed, and what you might have is more bureaucracy that's less at the level of a one contract. It might be divided up. And in some cases there are standard contracts, because some countries are part of the EU, they're part of trade agreements that are not in a negative way but are sort of imposed on them because they've signed up to certain agreements that they have to follow, Form 1, Form 2, Form 3 and so on. So you need to know all of that stuff. Some of it's softer around culture, some of it's harder around bureaucratic systems and protocols and so on. But what I was also interested in when we played this negotiation game was that negotiation is also a skill. And I think there are 3 questions that you can always ask. And they sound a bit like a game, and in some ways when you're negotiating quite hard they are a game. But I think they operate literally on doing a deal here in the open market in Brighton, where you might be bartering over the price, and big international or business negotiations too, where you might be signing a trade agreement, buying and selling, doing some collaboration. The first question for you and your team is to be really clear, what do we want? There might be certain prices we want to pay, the length of a contract. We might want to have scrutiny over the quality of something. So if, for example, and I know a company that makes high-end saunas in the UK to sell to, in Brighton, we've got the beach box sauna, we've got kind of saunas everywhere along the seafront that you can earn quite a lot of money running those businesses. But the high-end ones need very, very good quality wood. The product needs to last a long time. It needs to be able to conduct the heat properly, not get damp, not go mouldy, all kinds of stuff. And wood in this country, for example, you might think would be the best place to get it, and it can be. But also it could be more expensive here than it could be in an East European country that has got more forests. That certainly happens in Scandinavia. And in this case, it could be Estonia that could actually give you a high quality wood much cheaper. But of course you'd have to negotiate and work out how you get the wood here. Is it better to actually have a partner over there that makes a part or all of your sauna and you just ship it over? There's all those questions. So the question we first have to ask when, for example, we might be negotiating with a supplier in Estonia would be, what do we want? We need to have a short-term, medium-term, long-term plan. We need to have the best case, the expected case, the worst case. We need to know what the politics are, the classic Pestel analysis, all of that stuff. But at the heart of it still is that with our growth plan of 10% over the next year, rising to 20% in 5 years, that we want X amount of wood at this sort of price and this sort of discount and this sort of quality and this sort of regularity of delivery and this sort of amount of bureaucracy, which might have costs associated with it. But we need to know what we want. Then, of course, we're negotiating with someone else, and this is where you do your research. And some of you, of course, are doing that research right now for your projects. What do they want? Now, that's going to be a certain estimate, and it's going to be a better estimate if we're in really good dialogue with them and meeting them and visiting them. Otherwise, we're sort of guessing. But also, there is research out there saying what sorts of prices there are. There are price indexes. There's information that might give you an accurate answer. They're going to ask for this. This is how they're going to want to do business. They're not going to want to give you a 1-year contract. There they do things in 3-year contracts or 5-year contracts. They're going to want these assurances. They're going to want 20% discount off for this amount of selling, and all of that kind of stuff is there. It comes through dialogue, it comes through online research, and it comes through the negotiation. But going into a negotiation, also going, we've got a pretty good idea of what they're going to say, a bit like playing a game of chess. I think this is what their next move will be if I do this. It's slightly gambling, but what they want is really, really key, because it helps you identify your own minimums and maximums if you're in a negotiation. And I'm really interested in the third question, because I think it gets really interesting. And it might sound a bit like guesswork, but, you know, you've had lectures already around risk. There are risks and probabilities attached to this. But the third question, in some ways, is the real psychology one, the gambit question, which is we say, what do we want? What, in a way, do they want, or what do we think they want? And what do we think they think that we want? They're trying to get inside their heads. You can often kind of psych out people, not in a negative way, through observing what their behaviour's been with other business deals, having all the rituals about taking them out to dinner and all of that kind of stuff. And that might be one of your recommendations for one of the businesses wanting to go to Canada, is that they fly out there, they meet potential partners or suppliers, and, you know, they're loaded with the questions of what they're going to ask. And ideally, and this is what happened in the game we played, the negotiation game, the two partners got to an agreement in this game because they were very open and trusting and transparent with each other, and they didn't really hide their cards as if it was a poker game. And so there was a lot of upfront sharing, and I was impressed with the group, because it doesn't always happen that you get there. So what do we want? What do they want? And what do we think they think we want gives us even more information. It's a kind of psychology, but that helps you then develop what the limits are, what the flexibility might be. And often you need to go into the unknown with a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. And if this doesn't come off, then we'll do that. And you can identify literally price points with certain levels of discount and all of that kind of stuff in advance. And knowing what we think that they think that we want a fast contract, a fast deal. They think that we want high discounts because they think that we're dependent on them. We need their business in the UK. Whatever those things are, they might prove right or wrong, and you need to adapt. But that's the negotiation game. What do we want? Really clear for us, and we tell them. What do obviously what do we think they want, and of course they will tell us, but then also what do we think they think we want. 3 levels, it gets more difficult to work them out. Really, really interesting, and becomes particularly important when you're negotiating with partners that you do not know, because you're going to need to find out as much as you can.